Everybody good? All right, thank you. So good afternoon. I am Colonel John Boulay, Vice Chair of the Waterfront Alliance, and what a day it's been, right? Great day. Let's give the staff of the Waterfront Alliance a big round of applause. Just amazing. And I really want to thank each and every one of you for collaborating today, and thank most of you, maybe all of you, for being part of what I like to call the Resilience Army. And because to get to the level of resilience needed, certainly in New York City and areas beyond, it's going to take an army of patriots with passion to reduce the risk of our communities, an army of innovators, which many of you are, to provide smart and creative resilient solutions, an army of engaged citizens who will help to influence our elected leaders to make the right investments in increasing resilience across the region. That's the kind of army we need. And I got to tell you, I'm proud as heck to be part of the Waterfront Alliance, where I like to say the staff is some of the special forces of resilience, and hard at work every day, helping to increase resilience around this great city of ours. Also, with the same theme of water, I'm hoping that you're planning on a great summer on, in, and around the water. And I want to remind many of you, all of you, that you really should participate in the City of Water Day Festival produced by the Waterfront Alliance and our great partner, the Hudson Estuary Project. And it's going to be enhanced this year with an opening ceremony program on July 23rd to be held at Pier 84 by the Intrepid. We're going to bring back, everybody's wanted it by popular demand, our cardboard kayak race. So let's get excited about that. You might call that the resilience, the Navy part of the Resilience Army, maybe. And it's there'll be workable kayaks if they're temporary. They're temporary, made out of nothing but cardboard and tape for each one of you to compete for the glory of victory. We hope everyone can come out and watch the fun and participate on City of Water Day events, which are incredibly numerous, on July 25th. So please put that on your calendar. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce the New York City Congresswoman, Virginia Maloney. I'm hoping the Councilwoman will join us and enlist in this army of resilience. I think we can get her to enlist. She would be a powerful addition to the force for sure. A little bit about Congresswoman Maloney, and she's a lifelong resident of the East Side. She now represents New York District 4 and is a dedicated public servant to her hometown community. She sits on the committees of Housing and Building, Sanitation and Solid Waste Management, and Small Business, among others, and she chairs the Economic Development Committee. Her work is focused on improving affordability, strengthening government accountability, and expanding access to essential city services. She's also consulted for the federal government on major initiatives, including modernizing our high-speed rail with the FRA, building telecommunications infrastructure with the FCC, and improving healthcare outcomes. We are honored to have Virginia Maloney with us today, and please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, John, for that great introduction as well as the promotion. Very excited to be moving up. And I really want to thank the Waterfront Alliance for all the work that you do and all the work that went into this day. It's wonderful to be here with so many people who also care deeply about the future of New York's waterfront. New York would not be New York without water. 400 years ago, this city grew because of its harbor. Water made New York a center of trade, commerce, immigration, and industry. And it's connected this city to the rest of the world and helped shape the city we know and love today. And that relationship still matters enormously. Today, our waterfront is still essential to how New York functions, its transportation infrastructure, its economic infrastructure, it's a public space, and increasingly, it is the front line in our climate response. I spent part of my career at NYCEDC right in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy and saw firsthand how quickly infrastructure disruptions can cascade, how exposed neighborhoods can become, and how immense the recovery effort can be and continues to this day. I now have the privilege of representing District 4, which runs along the East River, including Midtown East and Stuytown. And the East River Esplanade is a vital part of daily life for many of my constituents. And the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project is one of the most significant climate infrastructure investments that the New York City area has seen, designed to protect thousands of residents and public open space from future storm surge we have to prepare for, and sea level rise. But resiliency is only part of the story. Our waterways are tremendous economic assets, and I believe we've really only started to scratch the surface of what's possible. As chair of Economic Development Committee in the Council, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we make better use of those assets through ferries, through freight movement, maritime commerce, tourism, waterfront access, and the industries that will define the next chapter of New York's economy. We're entering a moment this summer that's going to bring that opportunity into sharp focus. We have the World Cup coming to our city, and people literally coming to our coasts with Sail Forth, bringing tall ships into our harbors as part of America's 250 anniversary celebration. Our ferry system continues to expand. Just today, we announced expanded service for the summer with NYCEDC and the World Cup czar Maya Honda, and ferries that are going to be wrapped with FIFA World Cup branding displaying all 5 boroughs of New York. And with the Economic Development Committee, we visited Hunts Point, which is a key part of the Blue Highway, opening up conversations about how freight can move efficiently around the city. All of this points to one direction: a city thinking more seriously about its relationship with water. So much of what we're discussing today is really about the decisions we make as a community about our public assets. I want to recognize the students from Harbor School who are here today, and we'll be hearing from them soon, because ultimately, this work is about the city that we are building for the next generation, making sure that they see that there's real opportunity in the blue and green economy. New York has always been shaped by the water, and our future will be too. Thank you for having me.
Please welcome to the stage Waterfront Alliance's Senior Education Manager, Jessie Ann Rabaudo.
Hello, everybody. I am so happy to be here and to welcome a Harbor School student, Holden Sophia. Please join me on the stage. All right, so over the past couple of weeks, we worked with Harbor School students on a workplace challenge. And throughout this workplace challenge, we talked about a lot of different topics that are super relevant to everything that has been talked about today. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. All right, so can you share a little bit about what you worked on through the workplace challenge?
Me and my classmates. Hope it's on. Sorry. Me and my classmates worked on risk assessment protocols and researching specifically flood zones and what they do to the environment and the coast around us.
And so before this program, what did you think of climate resiliency? What did you think it meant, and how has that changed since this program?
I think before I thought that climate resiliency was improving the ecosystem and making it more sustainable for the future, and it's definitely, the definition I learned was more expanded and developed a little more further, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you expand on what that means? Does it mean community to you?
It definitely means a lot like community, where we're able to teach the people around us what it means to be climate resilient and how to better do that for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout this program, did you notice any moments where you actually felt like your work was actively making a difference?
There were definitely moments where we noticed it was making a difference, like being able to see our classmates actually listening to the presentation we were doing and being able to bring home the information we learned to like our family and our communities and people around us, so they can also learn what risk assessment means and for what to do in an emergency.
Yeah, and what was the most challenging part of this project?
I think the most challenging part was figuring out how to make our PSAs and our posters more accessible for everyone, making them clear to understand for people of all different levels of understanding, and making sure that even though they might not understand everything we're saying, they'll get the basics down and know how to safely move forward.
Yeah. And if you could keep on working on this project, what would you do next or differently?
I think next I would, because our project was very broad for everyone in flood zones, I would look a little more specifically to people in my communities and everyone else's communities and curate the presentation a little more to match what they would be experiencing.
Yeah. And if everybody in this room could take away one action to be more prepared for climate risks, what would you want them to do?
I think for looking forward, like, I want you all to take away how to look, like where to look if you're in a flood zone or in different, like heat zones, flood zones. Make sure you know what to do if any of these situations come about and how to prepare for them. And I think, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we have one more, and it's, do you see yourself doing something like this continued in your future career?
I think looking very broadly, I would want to work in something that helps with sustainability for the future of our Earth and everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage Julie Raskin, Waterfront Alliance's President and CEO.
All right, I'm back, and this is the last time you'll see me today without a drink in my hand. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our closing plenary, which is titled Learning from the Past to Prepare for the Future. And the future looks bright, thanks to the Harbor School, so that was very uplifting. So as someone who has spent most of my career in city government before coming to Waterfront Alliance, this is especially exciting to me. One thing you learn quickly in government is that climate leadership touches everything: housing, transportation, infrastructure, economic development, public health, and of course, our waterfront. And this moment feels particularly important. We're entering a new chapter of local leadership. We have growing climate risks, evolving federal dynamics, and an increasing need for government to deliver. What's exciting about this panel we're about to enter is that we have leaders who have seen this work evolve over decades, and we also have those that are new in leadership roles and must define what comes next and what bold leadership looks like now. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Maybe I'll have you come up onto your seats, and I'll read a brief introduction if that's all right. Any seat of your choosing. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
it's
Hi.
very nice
Thank
to
you
be
so
first.
much. Thank you. All right. And help yourselves to waters, even though they're very awkwardly placed. All right. I'm just going to introduce them, give a line or two about what each of our panelists do or have done, and then I have some questions for each of you. Starting on the far left, Costa Constantinides is now the CEO for the Variety Boys and Girls Club of Queens, and was former New York City council member representing District 22, where you also chaired the Environmental Protection Committee. I know you worked a lot with Waterfront Alliance in those days, so thank you. We have Dan Wiley next, who is the District Director for North Brooklyn and Western Queens in the office of Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. We have, Dan has a lot of friends here. Next, we have Deputy Mayor Julie Su. Julie Su is New York City's first ever Deputy Mayor for Environmental Justice. Economic Justice, I'm sorry. And the former Secretary of Labor for President Biden. And last, we have Louise Yeung, who is the Mamdani administration's Chief Climate Officer and brings decades of experience advancing climate actions across the city. So welcome our fantastic panelists. Dan, I'm going to start with you. You have been with Nydia for more than 20 years, and you've been to this Waterfront conference for almost all of those years. You've also been on the ground working with the advocates and community leaders throughout that time. So what do you feel like has been the biggest change or theme that you've seen in climate leadership since the time you started in New York 7's congressional district?
So Congresswoman Velázquez has always had a waterfront district that mirrors the industrial waterfront that has been through a lot of change. Environmental justice struggles, when I started working for her in 2000, the focus was very much focused on fighting power plants and incinerators and all kinds of noxious uses that tend to be clustered around communities of color. So environmental justice complaints were the kinds of press conferences that we would do with environmental justice groups like Uprose, New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, with advocacy also for access to open space and getting kind of fair share for parks. So for instance, Bush Terminal, if there's going to be a container port in Sunset Park, we should have a park in the middle of the park where there's a huge brownfield. So Brooklyn Bridge Park obviously was a big watershed in terms of converting for world-class parks, but also other communities should have the same. And then, of course, you had 2012 Hurricane Sandy come through, and the whole question of the distribution of resources for recovery and resiliency and how that's deployed. So I think that's, to say watershed is no pun intended, but then you have later Ida coming through and realizing it's not just a surge from the sea, but it's also what comes from the clouds and how drainage works, and working with the city and how do we actually have a plan that doesn't give us the bathtub effect with a HATS program that wants to build 20-foot walls on the waterfront, but really deal with multi-flood hazards and something that's more holistic. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I think that's the trajectory.
Thank you. Costa, I want to ask you a similar question. So you formerly chaired the Environmental Protection Committee in the council, and we worked with you a lot in those days. What were some of the biggest challenges in climate leadership in the 2010s, and do you think those challenges still exist today, or what might be different?
Sure. Julie, first, thank you for having me here today, and congratulations on this great event. Right when I got elected, we were just sort of dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy and grappling as a city, like, how do we protect our communities on the waterfront? In our neighborhood, as Dan was talking about, 55% of the city's power can come from my community any one given day, with peaker plants that were built during Power Now and that were polluting, creating an area where we called it, it's called Asthma Alley in Western Queens, where you have the Queensbridge houses, Ravenswood houses, and Astoria houses. And how do we reconcile that? We were dealing with a need for bold climate action. And at a time where the Bloomberg administration had done some things, but it really needs to be supercharged and people-powered. So how do you work in communities to make sure that they're the ones whose voices were being heard? And then right in the middle of the 2010s, the person who's now president was elected to office. And their challenge that they could have brought with them was, I remember him saying that if New York City wants to deal with flooding, everyone should just go buy an umbrella. And and that was his plan for us dealing with it. Thinking about, the challenges, one of the things I look back on is that some of our adversaries didn't see us coming as well. There was organizational, led by young people, led by community, that rallied. Greta and a lot of the other leaders internationally, nationally, and locally were able to get, AOC was elected. You had this sort of wave of green activism that was going on. I think what happened post-COVID, what's different now is that in the second term of this individual, and I won't say his name, it's like Voldemort, you just don't do it. But they're ready this time. And I think we all know that, right? They came into office, and even the folks we fought on big things like the Climate Mobilization Act, they're ready this time to sort of strike blows against climate justice and environmental justice. And we're in a moment now where we need to respond to that.
For Deputy Mayor Su and for Chief Climate Officer Yeung, so neither of you are new to positions of leadership, but of course you are new to this new administration, which marks new opportunities. So Mayor Mamdani energized millions of New Yorkers to reimagine excellence in government. What are you learning from the past to prepare for the future?
Thank you, Julie, and I'm delighted to be here with my colleague, our Chief Climate Officer, Louise Yeung, and with these two gentlemen, and to be at my very first Waterfront Alliance meeting. So thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm here as much to learn as I am to speak. There is much to be done in this moment, as was just said, in large part because one of the things we've learned from the past is that if we do not take care of our climate, the effects are devastating. And they're devastating in all the ways that Dan mentioned in terms of hurricanes and floods and other disasters. They're also disproportionately devastating. The worst effects are felt in communities of color and in poor communities. And I think the other piece of it is that there's tremendous benefits to actually harnessing the potential for addressing and building a clean climate in terms of economic growth and economic jobs. And so that's part of the priority of this administration, of Mayor Mamdani, which is to use all the levers of city government to figure out how we address the big, huge challenges of our time. And that's partly why he created my position, the first deputy mayor for economic justice, recognizing that we cannot stay on a path in which we have big numbers for aggregate growth, but deep inequities in the result, or an ever-expanding skyline or even waterfront where we build beautiful things, but ever-shrinking lives for New Yorkers themselves. So that's really one of the core driving forces of this administration. And I will say, the other thing, just from my own past I learned, you mentioned that I was in the Biden administration. During that time, we made significant investments, including in our climate. And what I saw there was that when the federal government invests in the right ways, you can actually make significant, you can make a real dent in what was looking like if you looked at all the Al Gore time talking about what was going to happen with the climate, you can make changes to that, right? So we made significant investments in infrastructure, and I say that in terms of climate because a lot of climate work is building more resilient infrastructure, right? Homes, buildings, roads, bridges, and the like. We made the highest number of dollars in infrastructure investments since this country built the federal highway system. We also made incredible investments in science and research, more than was made when the country sent the first man to the moon. And we made significant investments in climate itself, which led to many changes, including right here in New York City, on investing in climate resilience. But the other lesson, I guess, of the present about the past is that those things can be reversed like that. Right? And they have been. And so now I think to just bring it home to the city, the challenges before us, but also our commitment is to figure out how we use city investments, city land, city levers to continue to do the really important work of preserving our waterfront, of maximizing its benefits for the most number of people, and using those things to make life better for New Yorkers. And with that, I will turn it over to our Chief Climate Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. To build on, where you left off, for me, as someone who's been working in New York City government with many of you over the last decade, a couple of lessons that I've been reflecting on, as Deputy Mayor Sue was saying, climate change is exacerbates so many existing inequalities. When we talk about the cost of living crisis, when we talk about structural racism, when we talk about all of these all of our sort of extractive economic models that got us to this place, that is all affected by climate change even more so. And you cannot separate those two things. And so as we are thinking about climate justice here at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, we're also thinking about what that means to tie that to economic justice and make sure that those who are on the front lines of climate change, whether you live in a waterfront community or a low-lying inland community that's susceptible to flash flooding, whether you are a person with disabilities right now or in the future, whether you are an older adult, whether you're a young person, there's so many people on the front lines of climate change. And so how do we really center the needs and experiences of our frontline communities in the way that we plan and develop our policies? The second thing I would say, and I appreciated Dan and Costa, your sort of walkthrough of how climate policy in New York has taken shape in the last decade or so since Sandy. We cannot just look one hazard at a time for what's coming next. We have experienced so many firsts of. We never thought that New York City would be susceptible to wildfires. It was not part of our hazard mitigation plan. It had not really been something we contemplated with real seriousness until the Canadian wildfires a couple years ago made our skies orange, and we then realized we needed to develop all sorts of protocols for what to do in that situation. Same thing with drought. We've always been a city that struggled with too much water, and so when the droughts last fall happened, and we had hundreds of brush fires, that's something we didn't really prepare for. And so what I'm really excited to focus on in partnership with you all is how to be on our front foot, where we're not just responding to the last crisis, but we're really thinking proactively about how all these hazards interact together, and we're not just looking one disaster at a time. And then the last thing I'll say is, as we do a lot of work with our community partners and with New Yorkers, I think it's important to remember to lead with humility and with curiosity. We all collectively have so many different kinds of knowledge. I know many of you in this room are engineers, designers, architects, policymakers, urban planners, people who just enjoy the waterfront. And there's also all of our lived experiences that we bring from all of our different identities. And that's the case with every New Yorker who interfaces with the city in our public meetings, our surveys, the many things that we ask of you to help inform our policies. And so I think, as practitioners, leading with that kind of curiosity and humility can really go a long way in finding those creative solutions that we're designing together. We don't want to come in here and say, here's our solution for your waterfront. We want to really be making those decisions in a way that's transparent and collaborative as much as we can. So those are the reflections I'm thinking about.
Very reassuring. Thank you. This is a follow-up question for everyone, and Deputy Mayor Sue, you actually spoke to this very, very well. A theme for this whole session is about the urgent need for local leadership. And I guess it's no surprise to anyone that New York's relationship with the federal government at the moment is complicated, strained. So how is New York City stepping up? How do you see more opportunities for New York City to step up? What does local leadership look like now? What do we have to do to save ourselves?
Wants to start?
Anyone?
I think just kind of learning from history. After this current president was elected the first time, we had maybe passed a few climate bills in my first term. We had passed 8. In the last 4 years of my tenure, we passed 36, including like the environmental justice laws, including the Climate Mobilization Act, which included Local 97. We passed stuff on battery storage, on geothermal, on the waterfront. We worked with the Waterfront Alliance to put together the 5-borough resiliency plan, which ended up passing in 2021. We passed the Renewable Rikers Act. So I think that if we can learn from history, right now the federal government doesn't exist, and the EPA is more the Elegant Pen Association. They give out silver pens to each other rather than actually like doing things that are helpful. If they're not going to do the work, then the city has this opportunity to lead and lead boldly and to take on bills like that in the future. And if there's a boxing match, as I was saying before, like they knocked us on our heels and threw some punches, we get the opportunity to kind of punch back this time.
I love how explicit you are about what the problem is.
I'm Greek.
Love it. I think I'll build on that a little bit to say we should never underestimate the power of New York City, right? This is the largest city in the nation, and what we do does matter. It matters not just for our own waterfront and the examples that we set, but I think that it can actually make a significant impact on the climate overall. And so I would say a couple things about how the city can lead. I should say one thing, which is that we probably all watched with some awe our boss and America's favorite mayor go to Washington, D.C. and say, if you want to do right by New York City, I'm willing to work with you, even if you are the one who shall not be named. And so,
which was awesome.
I think we should not leave anything on the table, I guess is how I'll say that. And it's true that so much of what I worked on, so much of what I learned and saw in the federal government has been decimated cruelly and in disastrous ways, but there's still things that are out there that are operating maybe somewhat under the radar that we want to make sure comes in New York City. But there's also things, I know this has come up already here today, but things like the Blue Highway, right? That's something that people have talked about for a very long time. We are now on the cusp of actually being able to bring in, doing an RFP to get a barge that is going to demonstrate how we can actually move goods from the Brooklyn Marine Terminal to Hunts Point. I think that there's tremendous potential to our waterfront for a whole host of things, but that would both meet that twin goal of economic growth / economic development and our climate, right? And so when that happens, it is going to move hundreds of trucks off the roads. And that has, I don't need to say in this room, right, tremendous benefits all around in a whole host of ways. The other is our port, right? I mean, New York City has a port there in Brooklyn, and it has for some 40 years now deteriorated. Did somebody already just talk about that?
No, someone just was like, woo.
Oh, nice, thank you. And so the underinvestment, though, for the last few decades has a cost. And it's not living up to its full potential. So making sure that we do that. And then I guess the other thing, just to pick up on our Chief Climate Officer's point, is for us, local leadership really is about not dropping projects onto communities, but building them alongside communities. And there are waterfront communities who have been, for decades now, designing what it would look like to have true, maximum use of the waterfront and deep equity. And we don't need to do that from scratch. We should be working with those communities to make sure that happens. And just one example of that is I was recently with Uprose when they announced their Sunset Park solar project, which is going to decrease the cost of utilities some 20% for those who benefit. And what they told me and what I learned, and of course, our Chief Climate Officer was involved in this before the Mamdani administration, but it took 8 years to do that project. And because of what we're talking about, the urgency of all of that, none of us wants projects that should be done to take 8 years. So how do we act with the urgency that is required here? And part of that is eliminating red tape and speeding up permitting. I know administrations talk about it. We are serious about doing it. And part of it is about taking from the best of what communities already know and are doing and bringing them to the center of our administration and building them out instead of assuming that we know what to do better than those communities who've been living with it for a really long time.
I would just add that there's a lot of money that the administration brought in, previous administration brought in for community planning. You have the community development block grants, disaster recovery. State Department of State put a lot of money into like 50 communities across the state to do their own resiliency planning. So you have in Red Hook, for instance, you have a community resiliency plan that is very complex, a lot of input, a lot of work that went into it. In Sunset Park, you have Uprose, they have a climate justice center. It was many years of advocacy that got to the point where EDC was able to actually engage with Uprose to put that community solar on the Brooklyn Army Terminal. I would just say it's great to have a deputy mayor with the title of economic justice, because it seems to a lot of people like an oxymoron, and it shouldn't be. So if you can get that through to people's heads, that it's not an oxymoron, and actually engage with some of the community plans that have already been fostered to actually carry through. I think that would be a great step forward.
I mean, just to that point, the number of people who've said to me, and I think to the mayor, oh, you care about economic justice, you must not care about economic development. Or you want justice, you must not want growth, which is a gross misunderstanding of both what economic development and economic growth are and what justice is, but also tells us something about how maybe economic development has been narrowly thought of in the past. And so that's something that the mayor's leadership will help us to change.
A great segue to my next question for Deputy Mayor Sue. So this is a shift from prior administrations where the city's Economic Development Corporation, EDC, will fall under your portfolio. And EDC, I think there are many folks from EDC in this room. Waterfront Alliance has worked with EDC over the years. EDC carries a lot of waterfront work. Councilmember Maloney alluded to this. That it means resilience projects in Lower Manhattan, expanding waterfront greenways, wrapping new ferries, as they did this morning, and preparing for the World Cup, expanding ferries, just to name a few. So I think, do you have a vision for the future of EDC, and is that different than how it's been in the past? Is it
Yes.
in line with?
Yes, we do, and yes, it will be. But I also want to say that there are tremendously talented people inside of EDC, and who have done a lot of this work for a very long time. Now, EDC is one of the most important levers in city government, I think, for everything that we are talking about here. And I recently sat down with a few hundred of the staff to talk about my vision, but also to say two things. One is that what EDC does, the tools, the levers, the land is so invaluable to advancing a vision for this city. and that we want that vision to be something different than the unequal outcomes that actually helped propel Mayor Mamdani to power, right? He spoke to that inequality, he spoke to that affordability, and if we're gonna use every single lever of city government to address it, then that includes looking at how EDC's powers can be used in different ways. I also wanna say again, the folks inside EDC have been some of my best partners in trying to figure out what that looks like here today. And so the other thing I said to them is I am going to be clear about what we want to accomplish. I'm going to value what you bring to the table. And I'm going to challenge you, just like we're always challenging ourselves every single day, to unleash the full power of city government to do what has been done well, but to primarily lean into what has not and try to see what the different outcomes would be. And I spoke too long last time for the Chief Climate Officer to speak, so let me pass it to you to add.
Yeah, I would say, a lot of the work that we do, I sit in the mayor's office and, lead climate policy across the city administration, working with all of our agencies from transportation to health to economic development to worker protection. And so, we've been scheming, Deputy Mayor Sue and I, about all of the different parts of intersection. So for example, when we're talking about days like today of extreme heat and poor air quality, what are the levers that we can take as city government to protect workers who have to be outside for a lot of their workday, whether they're construction workers, street vendors, deliveristas, many professions here in New York City spend a lot of time outside, and so those are points of intersection. When we're talking about a green economy, how do we kind of move things towards that justice-oriented model of economic development? And we've been working with EDC and Deputy Mayor Sue's team on a clean harbor plan and what it looks like to decarbonize and electrify our harbor so that we are taking care of our emissions where we can as city government. So one of the things that I think is where city government is uniquely positioned is we can catalyze new emerging technologies and best practices, working with our elected official partners who always hold us accountable to these things. How can we actually make investments to pilot something, test out how it works, give feedback back to the manufacturers, like this is what we've been doing with Nydia and our heat pump program, working with manufacturers, testing how they work. They worked phenomenally during the cold snap, so we're really excited about that. And then scale them and adopt them using our bulk purchasing power, using our own city assets as proving grounds for that innovation. And then, bringing in that latest climate science and research. My office manages the New York City Panel on Climate Change and the climate science research that goes into that to make sure that we are all equipped with the latest data and the latest projections that we can respond to more proactively. So, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from our climate budget report that came out with our executive budget. We have invested in our 10-year capital plan $12 billion in concrete projects that reduce emissions, $18.5 billion in projects that improve flood resiliency, and $9 billion in projects that further our heat resiliency in our infrastructure. So this is really us putting our money where our mouth is, and we, thank you, Costa, it's a tight fiscal environment, so we are trying to make every dollar count, right? We don't want climate to be a luxury add-on to the way that we're designing and building our city. We want it to be part and parcel of what we're doing because we know that these impacts are already here and we need to be responsive to them. So,
Thank you. Last question for everyone. So this is a choose your own adventure. You can either just say one parting thought that you'd like everyone here to leave with today, or you can respond to this prompt, which is from all of your very different perspectives. Can you give us a sense of how Waterfront is part of your vision for leadership? Or you can just say what you want to, but quickly.
Well, I would like to volunteer the state to help out with offshore wind, despite the rollback and attempts to end offshore leases. We can still build a renewable pipeline. We can build the conduit to actually go out to these places and actually make Ravenswood the biggest power plant in the city, repower it so it can bring in renewable energy. And that renewable Queensbridge Express, that permitting could go on. And we could be building that now because there is going to be a change in the administration. There's going to be a change in Congress. It can't go on the way it is right now. Definitely it can't. For sustainability and everybody's sanity. So I would just, since the state isn't here on this panel, I would just welcome them to join us and the mayor's team to move this forward.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great.
You know, I mean, for me, thinking about leadership on the waterfront, I mean, we're building in the private sector. You know, the mayor's office is killing it. Like from the private sector's perspective, we're trying to dovetail, right? Like we're building the largest Boys and Girls Club in the United States in Western Queens that's completely carbon neutral. And only a few blocks away, you know, with the mayor's help and with the governor's help and the state and the federal government, all of our partners working together. But it's really about creating that leadership that you had the young person from the Harbor School, that leadership and giving them the forum to be able to be the leaders of the 21st century and to be able to get on the water and see the ecosystem and touch that water that maybe they don't have a connection to. We're going to have a biobus bat cave that's going to be able to go into the water and get samples and bring it back to our kids so that they can be able to learn and be those leaders of the 21st century.
Thank you.
Yes, I can pick us up from the city side. You know, New York City has always been a waterfront city. We have 520 miles of coastline. We are like you know, our communities are pretty inextricably tied to the waterfront, and so I think any vision for New York City has to include the many, many different waterfront users. And I guess maybe to bring it back to a personal anecdote, the water is where I go when I need a peace of mind, when I need to clear my head, when I'm having a stressful day. It's where I go when I also want to feel joy and when I want relief from the heat. And it's also a place that we go for economic development. It's a place that many jobs are on the waterfront, many different kinds of uses. And some of them don't always work harmoniously together all the time, but this is our job as city government, is to figure out how, you know, this waterfront can support all of our different needs, and that we're good stewards of the waterfront too. And the stewardship looks like how we invest in our infrastructure, our properties, how we keep people safe from flooding, and how we maintain our green spaces on the waterfront that are so vital to our quality of life and our health and our well-being and our economy. And so I think, you know, I guess really appreciating all of the different people here and how we all touch the waterfront in different ways, personally and professionally, and I'm excited to continue investing in that waterfront for today and for generations to come.
That's right. So I think I'll just pick up right from there, which is there is tremendous talent and ability in this room. I think if you ask me about leadership, I think the thing that we can and must do is harness it to work in a more coordinated fashion together to reach the goals that we want. Because of the federal headwinds, because of the loss of funding for things that are so urgent right now, and because of the, you know, like I think it's great that we've been positive in this conversation, but if you look at what is happening to our planet, it's a dire situation. And to our Chief Climate Officer's point about we're always like bracing for the next disaster, really. And so how do we work together to try to really address that? And I think that requires us both to bring everything we have to the table and also get out of the traditional ways that we have always functioned and been comfortable with. And we are challenging ourselves to do that every single day inside of city government. To say one really concrete thing about it, you know, I learned also in my time in the highest levels of the federal government that when you address the economy through a very coordinated industrial policy, right? That the government can help to grow industries in areas that will meet multiple needs at the same time, right? That will address climate, that will redress resiliency, that will create good jobs, that will help diversify an economy. All those things have multiple and cascading benefits. So what would an city-led industrial policy, given the size and the many assets of New York City, look like? And how do we think about what we're doing, not just as our own little project, but as part of a broader policy about growing industries, including climate resilience industries here in New York City. We cannot continue with business as usual. And we cannot allow the stupidity, I don't know, I was trying to find a nicer word, the inane, national politics to feel overwhelming. And I think they are not in New York City. And so this is a moment in which everybody is watching what we do. Everybody is looking to see what is possible because of what's happening in New York City. And I cannot think of a better place and a better people to come up with the right answers to show both what is possible now and what the world can look like when we get through this moment that our country is in. So look forward to doing that with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. This was such a treat, such an incredible panel to end on, such incredible leadership here. I feel reassured and fortunate to be partnered and working with you all on the future. So you are welcome to hang out. I have a few closing announcements before we head out to our happy hour, but thank you again so much. If we could all give our panelists one more round of applause. So I hope you all have found this day as inspiring as I have. I think you have because you're still here. It's almost time for our happy hour, but before I dismiss you, I promised earlier that I would read off the names and would give out the prizes for the networking game. My phone has been blowing up because it's been a fraught networking game experience. This is unprecedented in Waterfront Alliance history. We have an 8-way tie. So I have a bunch of messages about it, and I'm going to try to synthesize them. What we're going to do is that we realized we could clock in when people actually won and achieved the maximum points. So we are going to award the people who achieved the maximum points quickly. I hope I'm explaining that right. So that means that the third place finisher was Christian Mariquin. He is not here. So the choice of the Waterfront Alliance hat goes to Jim Bryan. Is Jim Bryan here? And okay, I was told if Jim Bryan is not here, then Jamie Ledesma. And if Jamie is not here, then I really hope LaDawn Haglund is here. Yay! It's worth sticking around to the end. So we will get you a Waterfront Alliance hat, a brand new merch, so stick around. All right, the sail on the Pioneer from the South Street Seaport Museum goes to Leah Clark. Yay! One of our student presenters from this morning. Congratulations. And the Forest Hills concert tickets go to Sam Sklar. Sam here. Yes. All right. Nice job, everybody. Thank you. And the others who all did win but didn't get there in time, Jamie LaDawn, Grace Venata, and Chris Secord, please stop by the merch table. We have something special for you as well. Everybody's a winner in the Waterfront Alliance networking game. Okay. And those of you that I just mentioned, you can come to the stage and we'll get you your prizes. So anyway, this has just been incredible. We are going to email out a survey. We really read it. It's important. We want to hear from you which panels were most engaging. How did you like the food? What did you think of the walking tours? All of that stuff. It helps us developing the programming for next year. If you answer that, we're going to do a draw for free tickets to next year too. So that's an incentive. We did record sessions today, so those of you seeking CEUs or PDHs, we have a QR code as well for that. I think David will flip to that you can make sure that you get your credits. We'll have a follow-up email about that too. We did record on video all the sessions. That will be up eventually on our YouTube, as well as photos. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Huge thank you, as our Vice Chair, John Belay, said, to the Waterfront Alliance staff. This is an enormous undertaking, as I have learned. Wow. Yeah, and this, needless to say, is our biggest waterfront conference yet, our richest in terms of programming, our most complicated. So with the same, if not fewer, staff this year doing that work, so it was an incredible feat. And then, yeah, then we get to go up and eat and drink. So I'll see you then, and see you next year. Thank you.